continuing section 4.6, we're going to look at the mechanics of actually coming up with numbers to do what we call completing the square. So if we have a quadratic equation, and this is just general, ax squared plus bx plus c equals d, for example, and ax squared plus bx, even the plus c, is not part of a perfect square trinomial. We need to manipulate the equation in a way to make it part of a perfect square trinomial. So if we want to do this visually, let's say I have let's go back, take you back. Let's say I have x squared plus, we'll do just an easy one or a more simple one. We'll do x squared plus 2x. Okay. So let's say I just have x squared plus 2x, and I want to know how I can complete that square. Okay. So I have an x squared, and I have 2 x's. How would I rearrange these so that they are as close to square as possible? Should I put them like right here next to everything right next to each other like this? Okay, so that's still a lot more like a rectangle than a square. But what if I take this and I put it up here? So we're close to square, right? Because I have, as far as lengths go, I have an x and I have a 1, so that's x plus 1. And I have an x here and a 1 here, so that's also x plus 1. Is it a square yet, though? What's missing? How much is missing? How much is missing? A cube. And its dimensions are 1 and 1, which gives us 1. So what number we would have to add 1 unit to this to make it a perfect square. Okay. Now, the way that you can do that consistently without having to manipulate tiles around or squares and rectangles around. So you're going to start with, and when we're doing completing the square, you're always only going to have 1 x squared. And then you're going to have some number of x's, some number of rectangles. And what you're going to want to do with those rectangles is put some on the side and some on the top, right? Split them in half. So you're always going to take this number and divide it by 2. Because we're going to put some of the rectangles on the right and some of the rectangles on the top, half each place. So however many rectangles we had, we're going to put half of them on each side, right? And however many rectangles we put on each side, tells us the dimension of whatever number of blocks we need to put there to finish the square off. So, the formula, okay, to complete the square, ax squared plus bx. You will take whatever that number is, b, divide it in half, and then square it. That is the number that we can add to this to make it a perfect square trinomial. So our first step in this process is to be able to figure out what value we need to plug in that will complete the square. So the way that we calculate that is we look at the number in front of x. Okay. We take that number, we divide it in half. Divided by 2. What do we get? -5. Then we square that number. -5 squared is? -5 times -5 is 25. The number that completes the square is 25. It's that easy. So we look in front, we look at the number in front of x. Divide by 2, we get square that. 3 times itself is +9, completes the square. So when you're given a quadratic equation, which this is because it has a squared, as an x squared and an x and a number, I always try to factor first. Okay. But for right now, we know we're going to use completing the square because that's the section we're on. But if you can factor it, please. So what we're going to do, we're always going to follow the same steps when we are solving by completing the square. We are always going to move this, whatever that number is, to the other side. Okay. So first, move the 6 by, in this case, subtracting, right? So I have 3x squared minus 12x equals -6. The next thing that you're going to do, divide by 3 in this case. So always divide by the number that's in front of x squared, which in this case is, so everything gets divided by 3. So I have x squared, 12 divided by 3 is 4, 6 divided by 3 is 2. Okay. Now I am going to complete the square. So I have x squared minus 4x. I want to add a number in there to complete the square. Equals -2, and if I add it on the left, I also have to add it on the right. So my number is going to be Negative 4 divided by 2 is negative 2. Square the negative 2. So plus 4 and plus 4. So now what happens, so I guess I should put third, complete the square. So what happens when we turn this into a perfect square trinomial is that it now factors into x minus 2, see where the negative 2 comes from? Squared. Negative 2 plus 4 is positive 2. Now, how do we solve this? Square root, square root. X minus 2 equals positive or negative square root of 2. Can we do anything with the square root of 2? No. If you type it into a calculator, you're going to get a nasty little decimal. So how do I write my answers to this? To get x by itself, I would add 2 to both sides, right? So I'm either going to have 2 plus the square root of 2, or 2 minus the square root of 2. That is how I am going to leave my answer.